So now we're going to move on to deploying our application into production. And you're going to see in this section of the tutorial series, we have a lot of things to cover still. So there's still a lot of things that we need to learn about Docker, a lot of best practices. So in the deployment section, what's going to happen is I'm going to show you guys how to deploy it. And we're going to start off by doing it the wrong way. And then we're going to slowly correct each mistake one by one so that you know exactly why we are doing these things. And then when we get to our final deployment scenario where we actually deploy our application the proper way and we know how to properly update our application, you're going to have a solid understanding as to why we are doing things the way that we are. And so keep in mind for this deployment section, we do need access to a Ubuntu server. And I don't really care where this Ubuntu server is running. You can run it on DigitalOcean like I'm going to do. You can run it on AWS as an EC2 instance. You can run it on GCP or Azure as a virtual machine. Or you can just spin up VirtualBox and then run a Ubuntu instance on your local machine. It doesn't really matter. You can follow along. And even if you can't, I still recommend you finish the rest of this video because we still have a lot more things to learn and a lot more things to cover. So don't think that this is just about the final step and we just got a couple more things to do and then we're done with the video. We still have a lot of things to learn. So definitely stick to watching this video even if you can't follow along with all of the steps. All right, so let's now get our Ubuntu server up and running. And like I said, we're going to deploy this on DigitalOcean as a droplet. However, if you want to use a different platform like AWS or Azure, or even run it as a virtual machine on VirtualBox on your local machine, feel free to do that. As long as you have an Ubuntu server someplace, you should be able to follow along with everything that I do. But I'm going to specifically do this on DigitalOcean. So if you guys want to see the exact steps to do this on DigitalOcean, it's pretty straightforward as well. So I'm going to click Get Started with the Droplet. And then here I'm going to select Ubuntu 20.04. We'll select the basic plan. And then we want to select regular Intel with SSD because it's cheaper. And then we select the cheapest option that we can find. And then by default, because I'm on the East Coast, it's going to default to the New York data center. Just pick whichever data center is closest to you geographically. And then we want to select our password. So put in your password here. Then we just hit Create Droplet. And so we'll let this run for a couple minutes. It does take some time for DigitalOcean to spin up a new VM. And then once that gets started, we'll then install Docker. We do need to install Docker on our production environment because that's how our application runs, obviously. So I'll see you guys in a minute or so. All right, so our droplet was created. We can see our public IP address. So let's copy that. And then I'm going to open up my terminal. Make this bigger for you guys. And then here we just do SSH root at, and then that IP address. And then we're going to say yes, and then put in our password. All right, and so now we're logged in. And the first thing that we have to do is get Docker installed. And so there's a couple of different ways to do this. So if you pull up the documentation for installing Docker Engine on Ubuntu, they've got some very easy steps to go through. It's just a couple of commands. However, there's an even easier method. So if you go to get.docker.com right here, there's actually a script that's hosted on this website that actually installs Docker for you automatically. So you just have to run one command. So here under this section right here, you just copy this curl command. And so all you have to do is copy that, paste it in here. And then what that's going to do is it's going to download a file called getdocker.sh. And then we can just say sh get-docker.sh. And so that's going to run through all the steps for getting Docker. And it's really just running the same exact steps here, but this just requires 2 commands. So I think it's a little easier, and that's the route that I'm going to go. All right, so it looks like it's completed. Let's verify that Docker was installed by doing a docker -- version. And we can see that it spits out a version, which means Docker was successfully installed. Now this only installs Docker. If you try to do docker -compose -v to get the version, looks like Docker Compose is not installed by default. So let's get that installed. Let's pull up the directions. So we'll say docker compose install Ubuntu. And then here we can just select Linux here. And we just copy this command, paste it in there, and then copy this command. So now if we do docker -compose -v, we should see it return a version. All right, and so now we've got Docker installed on our Ubuntu machine. In the next video, let's set up a Git for our application so that we can store our application in a Git repository, and then we can pull it into our production server.